Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Adventure and Mystery Book Club. I'm Bill Mallory, branch manager of the La Jolla Library. So glad you could join me today for today's reading, and we are going to be going through Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, chapters 6 through 8. So just a brief recap on what's going on in the story so far. We have our mysterious and surly and argumentative sailor who wanders in with his giant sea chest at the Admiral Benbow Inn, which is being run by uh, Jim Hawkins, a young man, and probably about 15 years old. Jim Hawkins and his family's mother and father. His father is unwell and ends up passing on very early on in the book. Our mysterious sailor, who they don't have a name for, but they call the captain, stays with them and drinks large quantities of rum. And if anyone doesn't join in his sailor songs, then he threatens them, and he's very malignant. He's not a very nice fellow, but he tells Jim to keep an eye out for a one-legged seafaring man, and gives him a four-penny piece every month just to keep an eye out for this one-legged seafaring man. But as it turns out, they do not see that man. What they see instead are two also very shady-looking pirates. One who goes by the name of Black Dog, who the captain fights with his cutlass and wounds him in the shoulder, and Black Dog goes running out of the inn. And then sometime later, the second apparition, if you will, the second pirate, not really an apparition, but it's dramatic license, by the name of Blind Pew, a blind man who takes Jim Hawkins' hand and twists it and hurts him, and he's going to break his arm, he says, if he doesn't show him where Billy Bones is. And they find out that Billy Bones is, in fact, who they call the captain, who's been staying at the Admiral Benbow Inn. So he does that. Jim Hawkins leads him into the inn, takes him to the room where Billy Bones, the captain, is staying and getting severely drunk on rum. And he basically gives him this page that has a black spot on it called, what else? The Black Spot, and says you have until 10 p.m. tomorrow. And then he releases Jim Hawkins, and then he leaves. And we don't know why this is happening or what's going on, but the stress of the whole thing causes Billy Bones to have a stroke. And at which point they call for the doctor, and the doctor is Dr. Livesey, and he checks him out. He says, "You've had a stroke. You're drinking too much rum." There's that really wonderful line in it that says, "For you, the name of death is rum," and basically saying if you keep drinking more rum, you will die. And so the Billy Bones recovers, and once all of this shenanigans starts going on with Blind Pew, he actually, once Blind Pew leaves, he falls down. Dead. He's basically dies right there. And so they go up, having seen that Jim Hawkins calls his mother, and they come and check him out, and it's, yes, he is in fact very dead. And the mother says, well, he owes me a lot of money for all the room and board and all the rum and all the everything. So they go up, they find a key on him, on his body, and they go up to his sea chest. They open it, and they don't really find anything really worth a whole lot. Some pistols and some compasses and there's a bag of money, and his mother sort of very studiously uh, doles out the exact amount that she believes to be what is owed, and she's very important to her that she knows that she does not take a penny more than she is owed for everything that has happened up to this point. However, while she's going through the money, two things happen. One is that Jim Hawkins finds an oilskin pouch wrapped up and seemingly somewhat important, certainly, more of a mystery than anything else that's in the chest, and he puts it in his pocket. And the second thing is that Blind Pew comes back with his men and bangs on the door, and they break. Uh, he bangs on the door first, and then once they get the money and they find out this oilskin pouch, they then dash out of the inn and run to the town as fast as they can, and they don't get very far before the mother has a fainting spell. Right, this is all too much for her. She has a fainting spell, and basically Jim Hawkins is dragging her down so that they are under a bridge, so they cannot be easily seen by these pirates. Because as soon as they leave, the pirates come back. Blind Pew comes back, and he's got all of his men with him this time, including Black Dog, who we've already seen. And they go through and they ransack the inn. They trash the place. They find the chest. The chest is open. They know it's the mother and son who've opened it. They find the money that's left over, and many of them are willing to just say, "Hey, we got the money. Let's go." And then Blind Pew says, "Hang the money. It's not about the money. There's something else that's worth 10 times that, 100 times that, and it's gone. And so we have to find them." Meanwhile, all these men are thinking, this is a pretty good amount of money. If we all dole this up between ourselves, it's all going to be well and good, and we'll all, be able to buy some rum ourselves, and we'll be able to have a good time. And so there's really not the motivation. There's really a kind of a lack of interest. But once all this starts, some constables come, and everyone scatters. Everyone runs, and they leave Blind Pew all by himself. And in the dark, Blind Pew is run over by the horses that they were galloping in on, and he is killed. And so there we go. So several things, have happened so far in our story. The old pirate Billy Bones is dead. Jim Hawkins' father is dead, and now this very sinister man, Blind Pew, is now dead, and Jim still has the oilskin pouch in his pocket, and so that's where we stand right now. And if you are ready, let us continue our story, and we'll see what happens in Chapter 6, entitled The Captain's Papers. We rode hard all the way till we drew up before Dr. Livesey's door. The house was all dark to the front. Mr. Dance told me to jump down and knock, and Dogger gave me a stirrup to descend by. The door was opened almost at once by a maid. "Is Dr. Livesey in?" I asked. "No," she said. "He had come home in the afternoon, but had gone up to the hall to dine, and pass the evening with the squire." "So there we go, boys," said Mr. Dance. This time the distance was short. I did not mount, but ran with Dogger's stirrup leather to the lodge gates, and up the long, leafless, moonlit avenue to where the white line of the hall buildings looked on either hand on great old gardens. Here Mr. Dance dismounted, and, taking me along with him, was admitted at a word into the house. The servant led us down a matted passage, and showed us at the end into a great library, all lined with bookcases and busts upon the top of them, where the squire and Dr. Livesey sat, pipe in hand, on either side of a bright fire. I had never seen the squire so near at hand. He was a tall man, over 6 feet high and broad in proportion, and he had a bluff, rough and ready face, all roughened and reddened and lined in his long travels. His eyebrows were very black and moved readily, and this gave him a look of some temper. Not bad, you would say, but quick and high. "Come in, Mr. Dance," says he, very stately and condescending. "Good evening, Dance," says the doctor, with a nod, "and good evening to you, friend Jim. What good wind brings you here?" The supervisor stood up straight and stiff and told his story like a lesson, and you should have seen how the two gentlemen leaned forward and looked at each other and forgot to smoke in their surprise and interest. When they heard how my mother went back to the inn, Dr. Livesey fairly slapped his thigh, and the squire cried "Bravo!" and broke his long pipe against the grate. Long before it was done, Mr. Trelawney, that, you will remember, was the squire's name, had got up from his seat and was striding about the room, and the doctor, as if to hear better, had taken off his powdered wig and sat there looking very strange indeed with his own close-cropped black poll. At last Mr. Dance finished the story. "Mr. Dance," said the squire, "you are a very noble fellow, and as for riding down that black, atrocious miscreant, I regard it as an act of virtue, sir, like stamping on a cockroach. This lad Hawkins is a trump, I perceive. Hawkins, will you ring that bell? Mr. Dance must have some ale." "And so, Jim," said the doctor, "you have the thing that they were after, have you?" "Here it is, sir," said I, and gave him the oilskin packet. The doctor looked it all over, as if his fingers were itching to open it, but instead of doing that, he put it quietly in the pocket of his coat. "Squire," said he, "when Dance has had his ale, he must, of course, be off on his Majesty's service. But I mean to keep Jim Hawkins here to sleep at my house, and with your permission, I propose we should have up the cold pie and let him sup." "As you will, Livesey," said the squire. "Hawkins has earned better than cold pie." And so a big pigeon pie was brought in and put on a side table, and I made a hearty supper, for I was as hungry as a hawk, while Mr. Dance was further complimented and, at last, dismissed. "And now, squire," said the doctor. "And now, Livesey," said the squire, in the same breath. "One at a time, laughed Dr. Livesey. "You have heard of this Flint, I suppose?" "Heard of him," cried the squire. "Heard of him, you say? He was the bloodthirstiest buccaneer that sailed. Blackbeard was a child to Flint. The Spaniards were so prodigiously afraid of him that, I tell you, sir, I was sometimes proud he was an Englishman. I've seen his top sails with these eyes off Trinidad, and the cowardly son of a rampuncheon that I sailed with put back, sir, into port of Spain." "Well, I've heard of him myself, in England," said the doctor. "But the point is, had he money?" "Money!" cried the squire. "Have you heard the story? What were these villains after but money? What do they care for but money? For what would they risk their rascal carcasses but money?" "That we all shall know," replied the doctor. "But you are so confoundedly hot-headed and exclamatory that I cannot get a word in. What I want to know is this. Supposing that I have here in my pocket some clue to where Flint buried his treasure, will that treasure amount to much?" "Amount, sir!" cried the squire. "It will amount to this. If we have the clue you talk about, I fit out a ship in Bristol dock, and take you and Hawkins here along, and I'll have that treasure if I search a year." "Very well," said the doctor. "Now then, if Jim is agreeable, we'll open the packet. If he laid it, and he laid it before him on the table. The bundle was sewn together, and the doctor had to get out his instrument case and cut the stitches with his medical scissors. It contained two things, a book and a sealed paper. "First of all, we'll try the book," observed the doctor. The squire and I were both peering over his shoulder as he opened it, for Dr. Livesey had kindly motioned to me to come round from the side table where I had been eating to enjoy the sport of the search. On the first page there were only some scraps of writing, such as a man with a pen in his hand might make for idleness or practice. One was the same as the tattoo mark, "Billy Bones, his fancy." Then there was "Mr. W. Bones, mate." Also, "No more rum," and "Off Palm Key, he got it," and some other net snatches, mostly single words and unintelligible. I could not help wondering who it was that had got it, and what it was that he got. A knife in the back, as like as not. "Not much instruction there," said Dr. Livesey as he passed on. The next 10 or 12 pages were filled with a curious series of entries. There was a date at one end of the line, and at the other a sum of money, as in common account books, but instead of explanatory writing, only a varying number of crosses between the two. On the 12th of June, 1745, for instance, a sum of £70 had plainly become due to someone, and there was nothing but 6 crosses to explain the cause. In a few cases, to be sure, the name of a place would be added, such as Ofe Caracas, or a mere entry of latitude and longitude, as 62 degrees 17 minutes 20 seconds, or 10 degrees 2 minutes 40 seconds. The record lasted over nearly 20 years, the amount of the separate entries growing larger as time went on, and at the end a grand total had been made out after 5 or 6 wrong additions. And these words appended, "Bones, his pile." "Again, make head or tail of this," said Dr. Livesey. "The thing is as clear as noonday," cried the squire. "This is the Black-Hearted Hound's account book. These crosses stand for the names of ships or towns that they sank or plundered. The sums are the scoundrel's share, and where he feared an ambiguity, you see how he added something clearer, Ofe Caracas. Now, you see, here was some unhappy vessel boarded off that coast. God help the poor souls that manned her. Coral long ago." "Right," said the doctor. "See what it is to be a traveler. Right. And the amounts increase, you see, as he rose in rank." There was little else in the volume but a few bearings of places noted in the blank leaves towards the end, and a table for reducing French, English, and Spanish moneys to a common value. "Thrifty man," cried the doctor. "He wasn't the one to be cheated." "And now," said the squire, "for the other." The paper had been sealed in several places with a thimble by way of seal, and the very thimble, perhaps, that I found in the captain's locker. The doctor opened the seals with great care, and there fell out the map of an island, with latitude and longitude, surroundings, names of hills and bays and inlets, and every particular that would be needed to bring a ship to a safe anchorage upon its shores. It was about 9 miles long and 5 across, shaped, you might say, like a fat dragon standing up, and had 2 fine landlocked harbors, and a hill in the center part marked the Spyglass. There were several additions of a later date, but above all, 3 crosses of red ink, 2 on the north part of the island, 1 in the southwest, and beside beside this last, in the same red ink and in a small, neat hand, very different from the captain's tottery characters, these words: "Bulk of treasure here." Over on the back, the same hand had written this further information: "Tall tree, spyglass shoulder, bearing a point to north by northeast. Skeleton Island, ESE, east by southeast and by east. 10 feet. The bar silver is in the north cache. You can find it by the trend of the east hummock, 10 fathoms south of the black crag with the face on it. The arms are easy found in the sand hill, north point of North Inlet Cape, bearing east and a quarter north. JF. That was all. But brief as it was, and to me incomprehensible, it filled the squire and Dr. Livesey with delight. "Livesey," said the squire, "you will give up this wretched practice at once. Tomorrow I start for Bristol. In 3 weeks' time, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 10 days, we'll have the best ship, sir, and the choicest crew in England. Hawkins shall come as cabin boy. You'll make a famous cabin boy, Hawkins. You, Livesey, are a ship's doctor. I am admiral. We'll take Redruth, Joyce, and Hunter. We'll have favorable winds, a quick passage, and not the least difficulty in finding the spot. The money to eat, to roll in, to play duck and drake with ever after." "Trelawney," said the doctor, "I'll go with you, and I'll go bail for it. So will Jim, and be a credit to the undertaking. There's only one man I'm afraid of." "And who's that?" cried the squire. "Name the dog, sir." "You," replied the doctor, "for you cannot hold your tongue. We are not the only men who know of this paper. These fellows who attacked the inn tonight, bold, desperate blades for sure, and the rest who stayed aboard, that lugger and more, I dare say, not far off, are, one and all, through thick and thin, bound that they'll get that money. We must none of us go alone till we get to sea. Jim and I shall stick together in the meanwhile. You'll take Joyce and Hunter when you ride to Bristol, and from first to last, not one of us must breathe a word of what we've found." "Livesey," returned the squire, "you are always in the right of it. I'll be as silent as the grave." And now, that's the end of chapter 6. We now go to part 2, entitled "The Sea Cook." This is chapter 7, which has its own entitlement, "I Go to Bristol." It was longer than the squire imagined ere we were ready for the sea, and none of our first plans, not even Dr. Livesey's of keeping me beside him, could be carried out as we intended. The doctor had to go to London for a physician to take charge of his practice. The squire was hard at work at Bristol, and I lived on at the Hall under the charge of old Redruth, the gamekeeper, almost a prisoner, but full of sea dreams and the most charming anticipations of strange islands and adventures. I brooded by the hour together over the map, all the details of which I well remembered. Sitting by the fire in the housekeeper's room, I approached that island in my fancy. From every possible direction, I explored every acre of its surface. I climbed 1,000 times to that tall hill they call the Spyglass, and from the top enjoyed the most wonderful and changing prospects. Sometimes the isle was thick with savages, with whom we fought, sometimes full of dangerous animals that hunted us. But in all my fancies, nothing occurred to me so strange and tragic as our actual adventures. So the weeks passed on, till one fine day there came a letter addressed to Dr. Livesey, with this addition: "To be opened in case of his absence by Tom Redruth or young Hawkins." Obeying this order, we found, or rather I found, for the gamekeeper was a poor hand at reading anything but print, the following important news. Old Anchor Inn, Bristol, March 1st, 17. Dear Livesey, as I do not know whether you are at the Hall or still in London, I send this in double to both places. The ship is bought and fitted. She lies at anchor ready for sea. You never imagined a sweeter schooner. A child might sail her. 200 tons. Name? Hispaniola. I got her through my old friend Blandly, who proved himself throughout the most surprising trump. The admirable fellow literally slaved in my interest, and so, I may say, did everyone in Bristol as soon as they got wind of the port we sailed for. Treasure, I mean. Redruth, said I, interrupting the letter, Dr. Livesey will not like that. The squire has been talking after all. Well, who's a better right? Growled the gamekeeper. A pretty rum go if squire ain't to talk for Dr. Livesey, I should think. At that I gave up all attempt at commentary and read straight on. Blandly himself found the Hispaniola and by the most admirable management got her for the merest trifle. There was a class of men in Bristol monstrously prejudiced against Blandly. They go the length of declaring that this honest creature would do anything for money, that the Hispaniola belonged to him, and that he sold it me absurdly high. The most transparent calumnies. None of them dare, however, to deny the merits of the ship. So far there was not a hitch. The work people, to be sure, riggers and what-not, were most annoyingly slow, but time cured that. It was the crew that troubled me. I wished a round score of men, in case of natives, buccaneers, or the odious French. And I had the worry of the deuce itself, to find so much as half a dozen. Till the most remarkable stroke of fortune brought me to the very man that I required. I was standing on the dock, when, by the merest accident, I fell in talk with him. I found he was an old sailor, kept a public house, knew all the seafaring men in Bristol, had lost his health ashore, and wanted a good berth as cook to get to sea again. He had hobbled down there that morning, he said, to get the smell of the salt. I was monstrously touched. So would you have been, and out of pure pity, I engaged him on the spot to be the ship's cook. Long John Silver, he is called. He has lost a leg, but that I regarded as a recommendation, since he lost it in his country's service under the immortal Hawk. He has no pension, Livesey. Imagine the abominable age we live in. Well, sir, I thought I had only found a cook, but it was a crew I had discovered. Between Silver and myself, we got together in a few days a company of the toughest old salts imaginable. Not pretty to look at, but fellows, by their faces, of the most indomitable spirit. I declare we could fight a frigate. Long John even got rid of 2 out of the 6 or 7 I had already engaged. He showed me in a moment that they were just the sort of freshwater swabs we had to fear in an adventure of importance. I am in the most magnificent health and spirits, eating like a bull, sleeping like a tree. Yet I shall not enjoy a moment till I hear my old tarpaulins tramping round the capstan. Seaward, ho! Hang the treasure! It's the glory of the sea that has turned my head. So now, Livesey, come post. Do not lose an hour, if you respect me. Let young Hawkins go at once to see his mother, with Redruth for a guard, and then both come full speed to Bristol. John Trelawney. Postscript. I did not tell you that Blandly, who, by the way, is to send a consort after us if we don't turn up by the end of August, had found an admirable fellow for sailing master, a stiff man, which I regret, but in all other respects a treasure. Long John Silver unearthed a very competent man for a mate, a man named Arrow. I have a boatswain whose pipes, Livesey, so things shall go man o' war fashion on board the good ship Hispaniola. I forgot to tell you that Silver is a man of substance. I know of my own knowledge that he has a banker's account, which has never been overdrawn. He leaves his wife to manage the inn, and as she is a woman of color, a pair of old bachelors like you and I may be excused for guessing that it is the wife, quite as much as the health that sends him back to roving. P.P.S. Hawkins may stay one night with his mother, J.T. You can fancy the excitement into which that letter put me. I was half beside myself with glee, and if I ever despised a man, it was old Tom Redruth, who could do nothing but grumble and lament. Any of the under gamekeepers would gladly have changed places with him, but such was not the squire's pleasure, and the squire's pleasure was like law among them all. Nobody but old Redruth would have dared so much as even to grumble. The next morning he and I set out on foot for the Admiral Benbow, and there I found my mother in good health and spirits. The captain, who had so long been a cause of so much discomfort, was gone where the wicked cease from troubling. The squire had everything repainted, and the public rooms and the sign repainted, and had added some furniture. Above all, a beautiful armchair for mother in the bar. He had found her as a boy, as an apprentice. Okay, let's try this again. Woo. He had found her a boy as an apprentice also, so that she should not want help while I was gone. It was on seeing that boy that I understood, for the first time, my situation. I had thought up that moment of the adventures before me, not at all of the home that I was leaving, and now at sight of this clumsy stranger, who was to stay here in my place beside my mother, I had my first attack of tears. I am afraid I led that boy a dog's life, for he was new to the work. I had 100 opportunities of setting him right and putting him down, and I was not slow to profit by them. The night passed, and the next day, after dinner, Redruth and I were afoot again and on the road. I said good-bye to mother and the cove where I had lived since I was born, and the dear old Admiral Benbow, since he was repainted no longer quite so dear. One of my last thoughts was of the captain, who had so often strode along the beach with his cocked hat, his saber-cut cheek, and his old brass telescope. Next moment we had turned the corner and my home was out of sight. The mail picked us up about dusk at the Royal George on the Heath. I was wedged in between Redruth and a stout old gentleman, and in spite of the swift motion and the cold night air, I must have dozed a great deal from the very first, and then slept like a log uphill and down dale, through stage after stage, for when I was awakened at last it was by a punch in the ribs, and I opened my eyes to find that we were standing still before a large building in a city street, and that the day had already broken a long time. "Where are we?" I asked. "Bristol," said Tom. "Get down." Mr. Trelawney had taken up his residence at an inn not far from the docks, to superintend the work upon the schooner. Thither we had now to walk, and our way, to my great delight, lay along the quays and beside the great multitude of ships of all sizes and rigs and nations. In one, sailors were singing at their work. In another, there were men aloft, high over my head, hanging to threads that seemed no thicker than a spider's. Though I had lived by the shore all my life, I seemed never to have been near the sea till then. The smell of tar and salt was something new. I saw the most wonderful figureheads that had all been far over the ocean. I saw besides many old sailors with rings in their ears and whiskers curled in ringlets and tarry pigtails and their swaggering, clumsy sea walk. And if I had seen as many kings or archbishops, I could not have been more delighted. And I was going to see myself, to sea in a schooner, with a piping boatswain and pig-tailed singing seamen, to sea bound for an unknown island to seek for buried treasures. While I was still in this delightful dream, we came suddenly in front of a large inn and met Squire Trelawney, all dressed out like a sea officer, in stout blue cloth, coming out of the door with a smile on his face and a capital imitation of a sailor's walk. "Here you are," he said, and the doctor came last night from London. Bravo! The ship's company complete. "Oh, sir," cried I, "when do we sail?" "Sail," says he. "We sail tomorrow." Chapter 8. At the Sign of the Spyglass. When I had done breakfasting, the squire gave me a note addressed to John Silver, at the Sign of the Spyglass, and he told me I should easily find the place by following the line of the docks, and keeping a bright lookout for a little tavern with a large brass telescope for sign. I set off, overjoyed at this opportunity to see some more of the ships and seamen. I picked my way among the great crowd of people and carts and bales, for the dock was now at its busiest, until I found the tavern in question. It was a bright enough little place of entertainment. The sign was newly painted, the windows had neat red curtains, the floor was cleanly sanded. There was a street on either side, and an open door on both, which made the large, low room pretty clear to see in spite of the clouds of tobacco smoke. The customers were mostly seafaring men, and they talked so loudly that I hung at the door, almost afraid to enter. As I was waiting, a man came out of the side room, and at a glance I was sure he must be Long John. His left leg was cut off close by the hip, and under his left shoulder he carried a crutch, which he managed with wonderful dexterity, hopping about upon it like a bird. He was very tall and strong, with a face as big as a ham, plain and pale, but intelligent and smiling. Indeed, he seemed in the most cheerful spirits, whistling as he moved about among the tables with a merry word or a slap on the shoulder for the more favored of his guests. Now, to tell you the truth, from the very first mention of Long John in Squire Trelawney's letter, I had taken a fear in my mind that he might prove to be the very one-legged sailor whom I had watched for so long at the old Benbow. But one look at the man before me was enough. I had seen the captain, and Black Dog, and the blind man Pew, and I thought I knew what a buccaneer was like. A very different creature, according to me, from this clean and pleasant-tempered landlord. I plucked up the courage at once, crossed the threshold, and walked right up to the man where he stood, propped on his crutch, talking to a customer. "Mr. Silver, sir," I asked, holding out the note. Yes, my lad, said he. Such is my name, to be sure, and who may you be? And then, as he saw the squire's letter, he seemed to me to give something almost like a start. Oh, said he, quite loud, and offering his hand, I see. You're our new cabin boy. Pleased I am to see ya. And he took my hand in his large, firm grasp. Just then, one of the customers at the far side rose suddenly and made for the door. It was close by him, and he was out in the street in a moment. But his hurry had attracted my notice, and I recognized him at a glance. It was the tallow-faced man wanting 2 fingers who had come first to the Admiral Benbow. Oh, I cried, stop him, it's Black Dog. I don't care 2 coppers who he is, cried Silver. But he hasn't paid his score. Harry, run and catch him. One of the others who was nearest the door leapt up and started in pursuit. If he were Admiral Hawke, he shall pay his score, cried Silver, and then, relinquishing my hand, who did you say he was? He asked. Black what? Dog, sir, said I. Has Mr. Trelawney not told you of the Buccaneers? He was one of them. So, cried Silver, in my house. Ben, run and help Harry. One of those swabs, was he? Well, that you drinking with him, Morgan. Step up here. The man whom he called Morgan, an old gray-haired, mahogany-faced sailor, came forward pretty sheepishly, rolling his quid. Now, Morgan, said Long John very sternly, you never clapped your eyes on that black dog before, did you now? Not I, sir, said Morgan with a salute. You didn't know his name, did you? No, sir. By the powers, Tom Morgan, it's as good for you, exclaimed the landlord. If you had been mixed up with the like of that, you would never have put another foot in my house, you may lay to that. And what was he saying to you? Don't rightly know, sir, answered Morgan. Do I call that a head on your shoulders, or a blessed dead eye? Cried Long John. Don't rightly know, do you? Perhaps you don't happen to rightly know who you was speaking to, perhaps. Come now. What was he, John? Voyages, captains, ships, pipe up. What was it? We were talking of keel-hauling, answered Morgan. Keel-hauling, was you? And a mighty suitable thing, too, and you may lay to that. Get back to your place for a lubber, Tom. And then, as Morgan rolled back to his seat, Silver added to me in a confidential whisper that was very flattering, as I thought. He's quite an honest man, Tom Morgan, only stupid. And now, he ran on again aloud, let's see, Black Dog? No, I don't know the name, not I. Yet I kind of think yes, I've seen the swab. He used to come here with a blind beggar, he used. That he did, you may be sure, said I. I knew that blind man, too. His name was Pugh. It was, cried Silver, now quite excited. Pugh! That were his name for certain. Ah, he looked like a shark, he did. If we run down this Black Dog, now there'll be news for Captain Trelawney. Ben's a good runner. Few seamen run better than Ben. He should run him down hand over hand, by the powers. He talked of keel-hauling, did he? I'll keel-haul him. At the same time he was jerking out these phrases, he was stumping up and down the tavern on his crutch, slapping tables with his hand and giving such a show of excitement as would have convinced an Old Bailey judge or a Bow Street runner. My suspicions had been thoroughly reawakened on finding Black Dog at the spyglass, and I watched the cook narrowly, but he was too deep and too ready and too clever for me, and by the time the two men had come back out of breath and confessed that they had lost the track in a crowd and had been scolded like thieves, I would have gone bail for the innocence of Long John Silver. "See here now, Hawkins," said he, "here's a blessed hard thing on a man like me, now ain't it? There's Captain Trelawney. What's he to think? Here I have this confounded son of a Dutchman sitting in my own house, drinking of my own rum. Here you comes and tells me of it plain, and here I am give us all the slip. Here I let him give us all the slip before my blessed deadlights. Now, Hawkins, you do me justice with the captain. You're a lad, you are, but you're as smart as paint. I see that when you first come in. Now, here it is. What could I do with this old timber I hobble on? When I was an A.B. master mariner, I'd have come up alongside of him, hand over hand, and broached him in a brace of old shakes, I would. But now... And then, all of a sudden, he stopped, and his jaw dropped as though he had remembered something. "The score!" he burst out. "3 goes of rum! Why, shiver me timbers if I hadn't forgotten my score." And, falling on a bench, he laughed until tears ran down his cheeks. I could not help joining, and we laughed together, peal after peal, until the tavern rang again. "Why, what a precious old sea-calf I am," he said, at last, wiping his cheeks. "You and me should get on well, Hawkins, for I'll take my Davy. I should be rated ship's boy. But come now, stand by to go about. This won't do. Duty is duty, messmates. I'll put on my old cocked hat and step along of you to Captain Trelawney and report this here affair. For, mind you, it's serious, young Hawkins, and neither you nor me's come out of it with what I should make so bold as to call credit. Neither you nor you neither, says you, not smart, none of the pair of us smart, but dash my buttons, that was a good un about my score." And he began to laugh again, and that so heartily, and though I did not see the joke as he did, I was again obliged to join him in his mirth. On our little walk along the quays, he made himself the most interesting companion, telling me about the different ships that we passed by, their rig, tonnage, and nationality, explaining the work that was going on forward, how one was discharging, another taking in cargo, and a third making ready for sea, and every now and then telling me some little anecdote of ships or seamen, or repeating a nautical phrase till I had learned it perfectly. I began to see that here was one of the best possible shipmates. When we got to the inn, the squire and Dr. Livesey were seated together finishing a quart of ale with a toast in it, before they should go aboard the schooner on a visit of inspection. Long John told the story from first to last with a great deal of spirit and the most perfect truth. That was how it were, now weren't it, Hawkins?" he would say now and again, and I could always bear him entirely out. The two gentlemen regretted that Black Dog had got away, but we all agreed there was nothing to be done, and after he had been complimented, Long John took up his crutch and departed. "All hands aboard by 4 this afternoon," shouted the squire after him. "Aye, aye, sir," cried the cook in the passage. "Well, squire," said Dr. Livesey, "I don't put much faith in your discoveries, as a general thing, but I will say this, John Silver suits me." "The man's a perfect trump," declared the squire. "And now," added the doctor, Jim may come on board with us, may he not? To be sure he may, says Squire. Take your hat, Hawkins, and we'll see the ship. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 8. And there we go. We have met Long John Silver, and we have learned about the Hispaniola. And so now our voyage is getting set to depart, and our story to begin in earnest. Thank you so much for joining me today for Treasure Island for these 3 chapters. We'll read another 3 chapters in 2 days on Friday at 4 p.m. I hope you can join me for that, and I hope you're reading along either in your own copy or if you go to Project Gutenberg, you can look at a copy for free. And I hope you're joining in on our reading. Thank you very much for being here, and we'll see you again. Bye, everyone.